Welcome back, scholars. This one is lesson 6-1.2 Trade in Africa, Persia, and the Ottoman Empire. We're going to take a moment in this lesson to kind of look at the inconsistencies in trade and the shifts in trade that are occurring in the predominantly Arab world. We're also going to dip into Africa a bit here, just to set up the age of exploration itself. So that is our purpose for today's lesson, and let's see where it takes us. Let's look first at African trade centers as the age of exploration itself is getting started. In 1450, when the age of exploration is really just getting going, the Mamluk Egyptian Empire was the most developed trade empire in Africa. Here we're seeing a trade empire that is based primarily in Egypt, but creeping up through modern Israel, Syria, Turkey. So a sizable chunk of the Mediterranean coast is being controlled by the Mamluk Egyptian Empire. Now, the Mamelukes themselves are former slaves. These were slaves that had been brought down into Egypt, seized control of the country, and now had control of North African trade itself. These Mamelukes are going to control that territory for quite some time. A little bit further down the coast, we have a couple of key trade cities. We have Mogadishu, and then a little further down, Mombasa. And they're going to be bringing goods up along the Silk Road. This is the southernmost point of the African leg of the Silk Road, to really connect Africa into this greater trading network. So this is Eastern Africa and its connections into the Silk Road. Let's kick it over to the West for a moment. West African trade. There is a very complex series of civilizations throughout West Africa, and we can see them down here, Ghana, Mali, Songhai. These are very interesting to delve into, but we're going to focus on Mali right now because Mali is going to tie into this storyline of our age of exploration. We'll get to Songhai in a later lesson. So we have the Mali Empire right here, which is going to be the first to establish regular trade routes with Europe itself. Now, the African caravans coming out of Mali are going to be traveling north through that Sahara Desert to hit these trade centers in the north. And from there, it's going to be connected to Europe as a whole. So West Africa is also tied into this global trading network. Now, the Kingdom of Mali, small typo there, apologize for that. The Kingdom of Mali is going to be the economic leader within West Africa. This guy right here is Mansa Musa, very wealthy, very influential, very powerful leader of the Mali Empire. And I actually saw an interesting thing on the internet lately about how in all of recorded human history, Mansa Musa is the single individual who controlled the most wealth. Well, that's actually not true. I did see it on the internet, but the internet doesn't always tell the truth. Fabulously rich, fabulously wealthy. He'd be the richest person alive on the world today, but there are several historical figures that had more wealth than him. But nonetheless, good job, Mansa Musa. Good job. Moving on. So how did he get this wealth? Well, he's fabulously wealthy with gold. There's just a ton of gold in that region. And to say there's a ton of gold, I really mean to say that there's millions and millions of tons of gold. It's just a very gold-rich part of the world. Or at least it was. See, this word right here, export, means that it is traveling out of West Africa in exchange for other trade goods. And as West Africa loses more and more and more of its gold, it actually starts to hurt it economically. And once that gold is starting to run out and it becomes harder for them to find it regularly and to mint it, they wind up going into a pretty significant economic decline. Now, the weakened economy of West Africa is going to bring up a topic that we will circle back to again and again and again throughout this unit on the age of exploration. And that is the sale of slaves. Now, this is not the first time in history by a long shot that slaves existed or were sold, but this is going to start a very long conversation about the sale of African slaves by European merchants. Because as the gold is running out and as these African nations still want the other trade goods that are coming in, slaves become what they sell. And they're able to do this because African slaves were highly valued in Europe, the Middle East, and Egypt, and they would only become increasingly so once colonization of the Americas begins. We'll get to that in a little while. But African slaves are now becoming a large trade good within this Silk Road network. That's all for Africa for now. Let's go look at Islam. Islam at this time has been dominated by the Ottoman Empire, but we also have some other powerful empires, including the Safavids. And as we've learned before, the Ottomans and the Safavids, they don't like each other all that much, and they're in quite a bit of conflict for basically the entire existence of the Safavid Empire. These two empires do not like each other, and they are fighting for, among other things, control of trade. See, the trade routes between the East and the West run right through both of their territories. And control of this territory, or victory in wars, mean that you can impose certain trade rights that are very popular and very profitable. And money, you want to have that monopoly. So control of those trade routes are key. Now, as these two Islamic empires over their long existence fought three very large, very long, and very hard wars for dominance, territory between the two regularly shifted back and forth. In particular to our story of European trade, access to the Black Sea was key. When the Safavid Empire had access to the Black Sea, they could trade with Europeans. When they don't, they can't. So as a part of our story, I would like you to focus on and remember that the Safavid Empire sometimes can be in the Black Sea and sometimes cannot. That is important. And what's really important to other rising stories is the fact that by the mid-1500s, the Ottomans had won this conflict. The Black Sea had become essentially an Ottoman lake, and the Mediterranean itself was under severe Ottoman control. The Ottomans really were in control of more than the Byzantines had really controlled in a long time. They're rivaling in land area the size of the old Roman Empire. They're not there, but they're rivaling it. And this is a very large, very significant empire. And control over this much territory, that's going to impact a lot of trade in and out of Europe. So by 1550, the Ottomans had it, right? They had gone through, and I'm going to brush through this, they'd crushed the Mamelukes, that other empire that we started our conversation today with. They crushed the Mamelukes, weakened the Safavids, so that the Safavids are no longer a serious threat. The Ottomans are large and in charge. And they control that entire section of the eastern Mediterranean Sea and all east-west trade routes. Look at this for a moment. If you're in Europe, particularly in Italy, and you want to be trading with China, well, this is all frozen tundra, virtually uninhabited land north of what is the Caspian Sea today. There's very little up there. There were some tricklings of trade that made their way through, but the main routes were through the civilized world. The Ottoman Empire has completely encircled those trade routes. They're in a really strong position. So if you're a European and you want to trade with the rest of the world, now is your time to start looking for other new trade routes. We'll be getting into this pretty soon, but we're going to start seeing the Europeans creeping around the west coast of Africa. They have to do this because you can't trade any other way. the Ottomans are boss. They're in charge. And if you don't want to deal with them and their taxes and their intermittent warfare with Europe and all these other issues, well, you've got to find another way. And we'll be looking more into exactly what the Europeans are doing to find their other way in a future lesson. But that's all for today. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.